My name is Emma, and I've always believed in love, even when it cost me everything. I grew up in a strict, wealthy family in Connecticut. My parents, Richard and Margaret, were the kind of people who believed in legacy more than life itself. My father came from old money and ran the family investment firm. My mother hosted charity galas that were more about showing off designer gowns than helping anyone. I was their only child, their golden girl. Everything I did was carefully managed. My friends, my clothes, my school, and most especially, my future. When I turned 23 and graduated top of my class from Columbia, they expected me to come home and start working at the firm. They even had a list of suitable men I was supposed to meet, mostly sons of their rich friends. I tried to play along for a while. I went on the dates. I wore the dresses. I smiled at the parties. But deep down, I was slowly dying inside. Then came Jake. I met Jake at a little jazz bar in Brooklyn. He wasn't rich, not even close. He was a struggling artist who worked at a garage during the day and painted murals on the weekends. He was funny, wild, kind, and full of life in a way I had never seen before. We talked for hours that night, and when he walked me to the subway, he didn't try anything slick. He just looked at me with those warm brown eyes and said, "I hope I see you again, Emma." And I did, again and again. I started skipping firm events just to meet Jake for tacos or sit by the river and talk about dreams. He showed me a side of life that wasn't scripted. He made me laugh until my stomach hurt. I fell for him hard and fast. The night I told my parents about Jake was the beginning of the end. They sat there at the dinner table in silence while I told them how happy I was, how in love I was, how I didn't care about money or status. I was shaking, but I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd support me. My mother dropped her fork. My father stared like I'd confessed to murder. Then came the words I'll never forget. "If you walk out that door and choose him, you are no longer our daughter." It felt like I had been slapped. Hard. I was stunned. I thought they were bluffing. I really did. But they weren't. The next day, my access to the family account was frozen. I got a call from the firm that my job offer had been revoked. My car, which they had leased, was taken away by a towing service in front of Jake's apartment. They even called Columbia to remove me from the alumni family newsletter. And still, I chose Jake. We moved into a tiny studio together, no air conditioning, barely any space, but filled with love. He painted murals on old buildings, and I picked up 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet. We struggled, but every night I came home to him. Every morning I woke up in his arms. I knew I made the right choice. Years passed. Jake's art began to get noticed. A viral photo of one of his murals led to commissions, then exhibitions. Meanwhile, I started a small business helping underprivileged kids learn creative writing, something I'd always wanted to do. Life wasn't easy, but it was ours. Pure and honest. And then came the wedding. It wasn't fancy. We held it at a rooftop garden in the Bronx with friends, flowers, and fairy lights. Jake wore a thrift store suit. I wore my grandmother's dress I had secretly kept hidden. Not one member of my family showed up. Not even a call. That night, as Jake and I slow danced under the stars, I told myself I would never let their absence poison this joy. But deep down, it still hurt. I spent the next few years growing my business. Jake began working with city officials to create community murals that told stories of neighborhoods and culture. We became well known, not just as a couple, but as change makers. One evening, while I was preparing lesson plans at home, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked it later, my hand froze. "Emma, it's Mom. Please call me back." That voice. So soft, so unsure, so not the woman who had once said I was dead to her. I didn't call her back. Not yet. Instead, I listened to that voicemail over and over. I wondered what had happened. Why now? Why after nearly 7 years? The next day, Jake came home with a puzzled look. "You're not going to believe this," he said, tossing a white envelope on the table. Your parents came to my studio today. I blinked. What? They looked rough. Your mom had tears in her eyes. Your dad looked small. I stared at him, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. What did they say? Jake sat down beside me and took my hand. They need help. Badly. I sat still, unsure if I wanted to scream or cry or both. Then he leaned closer and whispered something that shattered everything I thought I knew. Emma, they lost everything. I felt the ground tilt under me. He went on. The firm collapsed after a fraud investigation. Turns out one of your dad's partners was laundering money. Their accounts are frozen. The house was seized. Your dad is facing charges. They're living in a small condo your uncle gave them. I just sat there, stunned. I hadn't thought of them in years beyond the occasional stab of pain. I had built a new life, a happy life. And now, they had come crawling back. And it wasn't over. That night I received another call. This time it was my father. His voice shook. Emma, please, we need your help. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. He paused, then added one more sentence that I never thought I'd hear from the man who disowned me. We're sorry. I hung up without saying a word. And that's when I made my decision. They didn't know what was coming next. Because I had a plan. A plan for the perfect kind of revenge. One that was kind, but unforgettable. One they would never see coming. And it all started the very next morning when I walked into their apartment without knocking, holding a white envelope in my hand. And inside that envelope was something that would make them regret ever turning their backs on me. The hallway outside their condo smelled like dust and desperation. The once proud Richard and Margaret Montgomery were now renting a 2-bedroom unit in a run-down building with peeling walls and flickering lights. I stood in front of the door, envelope in hand, my heart pounding. My stomach turned, not because I felt bad, but because I didn't know what would happen once I stepped inside. I knocked once. The door creaked open almost immediately, and there stood my mother. Her silk blouse was wrinkled, her hair tied back in a loose bun, and her eyes, usually so sharp and cold, were red and swollen. She stared at me like I was a ghost. Emma, she whispered. Before she could say another word, I walked past her into the living room. The walls were bare. Boxes still lined the edges of the space like they'd never truly unpacked. My father sat on a worn couch, hunched over, his gray suit jacket too big on his now thinner frame. He looked up at me and tried to stand, but his legs seemed unsure beneath him. Sit, I said calmly. He obeyed without a word. I dropped the envelope on the chipped coffee table. They both stared at it like it was a bomb. Inside was a check. For $15,000. My mother looked confused. My father blinked rapidly. That should cover rent, utilities, and groceries for a few months, I said, crossing my arms. Don't worry, it's a gift, no strings. My mother's lips trembled. Emma, we don't deserve. No, you don't, I said flatly. But I'm giving it anyway. There was silence. Thick, uncomfortable silence. Then my father leaned forward, his hands shaking. We were wrong. About everything. I raised an eyebrow. He swallowed hard. About Jake, about you. About how we treated you. My mother nodded quickly. We were proud. Foolish. We thought we were protecting you. We didn't see. You didn't want to see, I interrupted. And just like that, her words died in her throat. I begged you to support me. I begged you to believe in my love. You didn't just say no. You destroyed me. You made me feel like I was nothing unless I played by your rules. They both looked down, silent. I don't hate you, I said, after a long pause. But I don't forgive you either. Not yet. They nodded. Slowly, quietly. I'll help you, I continued. Because I can. Because I have a good life now, and I believe in doing the right thing. but don't mistake my kindness for weakness." I picked up my purse and turned toward the door. Then my father said something that stopped me cold. Would Jake come visit sometime? I'd like to speak with him man to man." I didn't respond. I just walked out. Later that night, I told Jake everything. He was silent for a while, stirring his tea. Then he said, "Do you want me to go see him?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants them to feel what they made me feel, to suffer." Jake looked at me gently. "They already are, that's why they came crawling back." I knew he was right. The next few weeks were filled with strange, silent emotions. I visited them occasionally, bringing food, helping with paperwork. I never stayed long. I kept everything polite, professional, cold. One day, I got a call from a local magazine. They wanted to do a feature on Jake's murals and asked if I'd be part of the piece. Talk about our journey, our love story, the projects we now fund together. We agreed. The article was released a week later. It went viral. People were drawn to the story. From rejection to redemption, the couple who turned their pain into purpose. Jake and I were invited to speak at youth conferences. Nonprofits reached out for partnerships. We were even offered a book deal. Then something happened that caught me off guard. I got a letter in the mail from my childhood best friend Lily. We hadn't spoken in nearly 10 years. She had cut ties with me when I chose Jake. Her family was close to mine, and I guess she didn't want to risk their approval. The letter was short but emotional. She apologized, said she had followed our story and cried reading the article. She told me she regretted not standing by me when I needed her most. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I stared at the letter for a long time, thinking about how people reappear when it's convenient. Still, curiosity won. We met at a cozy cafe in Soho. She looked almost exactly the same, just a little older, a little more tired. "I was a coward," she said after we hugged awkwardly. "And I'm so sorry." I listened quietly. She told me how she had stayed in the world I escaped, fake smiles, shallow parties, keeping up appearances. She said seeing my happiness made her realize how trapped she was. "I don't blame you," I finally said. "But I don't forget either." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'm not asking to be best friends again. I just wanted to tell you the truth." For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange peace. Later that night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Emma Montgomery?" the voice asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is Linda from Rosewood Assisted Living. Your grandmother, Evelyn, recently moved in with us. She asked if you'd be willing to come visit." My heart dropped. I hadn't seen Grandma Evelyn since the day I left. She had always been kind, but never defied my parents. She had written me a single letter years ago, just one line. "I hope love is enough." I told Jake. "You should go," he said gently. So I did. I walked into Rosewood the next morning, unsure of what I'd find. And that's when I saw her, my grandmother, sitting by the window, eyes still sharp, holding a sketchbook filled with drawings of flowers and birds. She looked up and smiled. "I knew you'd come," she said. That was a low moment, a soft one, but a powerful one. And then came the next high. Because as I sat beside her, she reached into her drawer and handed me a letter. "It's from your grandfather," she whispered. "He left it with me before he died. He said it was for you, for only you." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was something I never could have imagined, and it would change everything. Again. The letter was written in neat, delicate cursive on yellowed paper that smelled faintly of cedar. My grandfather had passed away when I was 16, years before I ever met Jake. He was quiet and mysterious, a retired architect who spent his days in his workshop and his evenings watching the sky from the balcony. He rarely spoke in family gatherings, but when he did, everyone listened. I'd always thought he didn't pay much attention to me, But now, as I unfolded the letter, I realized I was wrong. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then life has already tested you more than I ever wanted. I hope you're strong. I believe you are. I watched you grow up in a world built on money, manners, and masks. I watched your mother and father try to turn you into a polished diamond of their making, never realizing you shined brighter when you were just yourself. When I was younger, I made my own mistakes. I married for approval, not love. That is something I regret deeply. I see now, in you, what I wish I had been brave enough to become. You may have been cast out, but you have not been forgotten. Enclosed is the deed to a lake house in Vermont, something I bought in secret long ago, hoping one day someone in the family would earn it by choosing truth over tradition. That someone is you. It's yours now. No one else knows about it. Use it well, and never forget, love is always enough. With all my heart, Grandpa James. I sat there, tears falling freely, the weight of his words crushing and lifting me at once. I looked up at my grandmother, who gave me a soft nod, her lips trembling. He always believed in you, she whispered. I didn't know what to say. I just reached out and held her hand. Later that evening, I told Jake everything. We pulled up the address on a map and found it nestled near a quiet lake in the Vermont countryside. A private property, untouched, hidden from the family's grasp. It's like he knew this moment would come, Jake said, wrapping his arm around me. It's a reward, I replied, for surviving the storm. A week later, we visited the house. It was perfect. A 2-story cottage with ivy crawling up the sides and wide glass windows facing the water. Inside, it smelled of pine and old books. Dust danced in the sunlight like golden sparks. It needed work, but it was ours. We decided then and there, we'd restore it, turn it into something meaningful. A retreat for artists and writers who had been cast aside like I had. A place to breathe and begin again. We named it the Second Chance House. Months passed, and word of the project spread. Donations came in. Volunteers showed up. People started sharing their stories with us. Stories of rejection, of redemption, of resilience. And then, one day I got a call that brought everything full circle. It was my father. His voice was thin, empty. Emma, your mother collapsed this morning. She's in the hospital. I didn't say anything. She's asking for you. I drove to the hospital in silence. Jake offered to come, but I needed to face this alone. When I entered the room, she was lying in the bed, pale and tired, an oxygen tube in her nose. She looked smaller, frailer, human. Emma, she said weakly, you came. I did. She reached for my hand. I let her take it. I've been thinking about the things I said, what I did, and I know an apology will never be enough. But I need to say it. I nodded slowly. She continued, you were always the strongest one. I see that now. I was afraid of losing you, and I lost you anyway. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to show it when you chose something I didn't understand. We talked for a long time. About the past, about Jake, about the baby I had just found out I was carrying. Yes, I was pregnant. A miracle, after doctors once told me it might not be possible. Her eyes lit up at the news. I hope I get to meet them, she said. You might, I replied, but only if you're ready to be someone they can be proud of. She nodded. I'll try. When I stepped out into the hallway, my father was sitting with his head in his hands. He looked up as I passed. Thank you, he said. I didn't answer, but I didn't walk away either. That night I sat on the porch of the Vermont house, watching the stars. Jake sat beside me, rubbing my belly gently. I think your grandfather gave us more than just a house, I said. He gave you freedom, Jake replied. No, I said, smiling. He gave me a weapon, a quiet one that helped me forgive, but never forget. And just as I leaned into Jake's shoulder, my phone buzzed. It was an email from the city council. They had approved the Second Chance House as an official nonprofit. The grant money was coming through. We were finally going to build the art center, the workshops, the cabins for guests. It was real. I had turned pain into purpose. But just when I thought the past was behind me, something happened that made me question everything. Because the next morning, I got another letter. This time, not from the past, but from someone I didn't even know existed. And the contents of that letter? They changed everything again. This time, forever. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and sealed with a wax stamp. No return address, no sender name. Just Emma Montgomery written in careful script. I stared at it for a long time, my fingers tracing the edges. Jake watched me from across the kitchen, a mug of coffee in his hand. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know," I replied. "Something feels off." I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter and a photograph. I read the letter first. "Dear Emma, you don't know me, but I've known of you for many years. My name is Grace Reynolds. I am your half-sister." My heart dropped. Our father, Richard Montgomery, had a relationship with my mother before he met your mom. It was brief, but it happened. I was born from it. He knew about me. He paid child support quietly, visited a few times, but he never told anyone about me, not even your mother. I never pushed. I always knew I was the secret. I followed your story in the press. I watched from a distance when you were disowned. And when I saw you rise from the ashes like a phoenix, I finally decided to reach out. I'm not writing to ask for money or family. I don't need anything. I'm a teacher. I live in Maine. I'm happy. But I wanted you to know, you're not alone. Not in the way you once thought. And maybe, just maybe, we could meet, even once. As sisters. With kindness, Grace. My hands trembled as I set the letter down. Jake came around the counter and gently picked up the photo that had fallen out. It was of a woman standing in a classroom holding a stack of books. She had brown eyes like mine, wavy dark hair, and the same dimple on her left cheek. "Wow," Jake said. "She looks like you." "I have a sister," I whispered, still stunned. This revelation tore open old wounds, but it also filled a part of me I didn't even realize was missing. All my life I thought I was the only one, the only child, the only daughter burdened with my parents' expectations. But I wasn't. There was someone else out there who had been forgotten, hidden, kept in the dark like me. I sat with the letter for hours, reading it over and over, thinking about what this meant, what it could become. The next morning, I wrote back, "Dear Grace, thank you for your letter and your honesty. I can't explain what it felt like to read your words, but I can say this. I would love to meet you, not as strangers, but as sisters." We made plans to meet in Boston, halfway between our homes. I was nervous but excited. It felt surreal. When we finally met at a small cafe near the harbor, we hugged like we'd known each other our whole lives. There were no awkward pauses, no forced conversation, just warmth, instant connection. Grace was brilliant, funny, compassionate. A quiet strength radiated from her like sunlight through clouds. She told me about her students, her garden, her rescue dog named Muffin. I told her about Jake, the baby, the lake house. Hours flew by. And then, just as we were getting ready to say goodbye, she pulled out a small notebook and handed it to me. "I think you should see this," she said. "What is it?" "It's my journal. I started writing in it after I found out who our father really was. Some of it might be hard to read, but I thought you deserved to know the full truth." I took it gently and promised to read it. Back in Vermont, I curled up on the couch and opened the first page. And what I found inside shook me to my core. Grace had written about secret meetings with our father, about the things he said, the regrets he had, And more importantly, the warnings he gave her. One passage stood out. "I've made enemies in the firm," he told me once. "Dangerous ones. If anything ever happens, tell Emma to be careful. There are things she doesn't know, things that could hurt her." I froze. Enemies. Dangerous? Jake noticed the change in my face. "What's wrong?" I handed him the journal. As he read, his jaw tightened. "You think this has to do with the firm's collapse?" "I don't know," I said. "But I think it's time we find out." We started digging, quietly. We reached out to an old employee from the firm, someone Jake knew from a city art project. She had left just before the investigation went public. What she told us changed everything. "Yes, your dad's partner was laundering money," she said. "But it went deeper. There was a real estate shell company used to funnel illegal funds through nonprofit fronts." My heart skipped. "Nonprofits like?" She nodded. "Like yours. But I don't think they expected you to grow this fast. Someone might be watching you now, especially after the press attention." Jake stood behind me, silent but alert. "Do you think we're in danger?" "Not yet," she said. "But if you dig too far, they'll notice." That night, Jake and I sat on the porch again, just like we had when all of this first began. Only now, everything had changed. We were no longer just a love story that defied the odds. We were part of something bigger, something darker. But instead of fear, I felt fire in my chest. I had already lost everything once. I had already survived. This time, I wasn't afraid of being disowned. This time, I was ready to fight. Because they came crawling back. And soon, they would wish they hadn't.